It is a newsmaker interview with someone who holds the title of Secretary General of the Supreme Committee for Delivery and Legacy. He leads the local organizing committee for Qatar of the 2022 FIFA World Cup. And with all due respect to all the VIPs gathered here today, our next guest is the man you need to know if you're a football fan. I don't know where he is. I'm looking for him, but let me tell him loud and clear from this stage, I am. It's a pleasure to invite Hassan Al-Thawadi, who will be joined by my former colleague from Al Jazeera English, MSNBC anchor and host of Ayman Mohyeldin. Welcome to you both.
Ladies and gentlemen, if everyone can take their seats so we can start this session, please. We are with, undoubtedly, as Rida was saying, the man of the hour. And I was going to say, if there's anyone who has an excuse to be late these days here in Qatar, it's probably you. So, first of all, how are you doing?
A little bit tired, but good. Frazzled a little bit, but okay.
Are you going to make it?
So far, it looks like I am, yes.
There's a lot to talk about, and you know, the nice thing, to be honest, when I was invited to do this, I was really honored because you and I have been speaking for the last couple of years. We've spoken in New York, we've spoken at the UN, and I feel like we have been having this ongoing conversation about Qatar's preparations for the World Cup and what kind of event it's going to be, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. But I thought I'd start this session with some of the news this week, and I'm sure for you it has felt like an eternity, but it probably has been the last 12 years. I want to start with the comments that have been made by the Dutch football coach, Louis van Gaal. He, if anyone hasn't heard, had some harsh words about Qatar hosting the 2022 World Cup. He said it was ridiculous and it was motivated by financial and monetary interests for FIFA. I want to give you a chance to respond to those comments by the Dutch football coach.
I mean, thank you very much, Ayman, for that. And look, I mean, I'd already responded to that comment, but I'll come back and say it as simple as this. I think it's a very irresponsible and ill-informed statement to be made. If you look at this region, if you look at the passion that this region has for the tournament, if you look at the capabilities over the past 10 years, and even beyond that, even before we bid for the World Cup, whether you look at the Asian Games in 2006 and the history that Qatar has continuously proven in terms of hosting major events, sporting and otherwise, I think we've developed a track record that showcases our abilities to host major events. And I think more importantly, the region itself has continuously shown the world, even though maybe not everybody paid attention, that we are a football-loving nation, we are passionate, we are a welcoming nation, and it's simply put our time, to host this tournament. And that was the essence of our bid as well. It's the first time for the Middle East and the Arab world to host, and we're doing it proudly, and we're doing it very successfully. As the previous test events have shown. The Arab Cup last year was a great success and a resounding success. And I think what it did is it brought to the prominence, again, the passion that people have in this region, but it also did something else. It showed the level of football. The level of football over here. I mean, if we're talking about purely from football development perspective, over the last 10 years, Qatar started with, somewhat of a less successful team. Today, we're Asian champions. Today, we are, we've participated in European competitions, we've participated in South American competitions. So purely from a football developing perspective, it's left a legacy on the country and as well as the region.
And you've successfully just completed hosting the Arab Cup, which I think for anybody who's familiar with the region would say was a seminal moment. I think a lot of people saw the opening ceremony, were moved by it, touched by it. And I think it raised a question for people like myself who spend a lot of time between the West and here about some of the criticism that is directed towards Qatar. And whether you feel from the position, from your perch, is there a double standard that is being applied to the way Qatar is hosting the World Cup? And we have this conversation now, and particularly in context of what has happened with Ukraine, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But the double standards have become glaring, and sometimes it becomes apparent that, you know, I'm curious to get your thoughts, it becomes apparent that there is a double standard. Do you see that? Is that a part of the reason why there is so much scrutiny on Qatar hosting this event?
You know, I always try to avoid using, you know, these words in terms of double standards, so on, but I'll talk about it maybe a little bit more in the perspective of, yes, you know, when we first won the right, we were an unknown entity, and it was understandable that people might not know us, and so, you know, have a lot of questions. Having said that, I think the level of scrutiny that we've gone through over the last 12 years, I don't think any other host nation had to undergo or had to go through the level of doubts. But then again, you know, to a certain extent, you say it comes with you know, with the baggage. But we have had to endure a lot more scrutiny. We had to endure a lot more skepticism, cynicism. But I think we've put our head down, and every step of the way, we've proven, you know, that the promises that we made in 2010, we started achieving them. We've achieved every promise that we've made. We've delivered. The legacy that we talked about when we talk about the tournament is not a legacy that's going to come after the tournament. It's a legacy that is coming and being delivered before the tournament. And I think in terms of, you know, the time for the Arab world to shine in global football, in the world football, you know, we've always said the time is now. We said it in 2010. Her Highness said it in the final presentation. The time is now, and I think we are beginning to deliver, you know, the seminal event, the major. I think probably the biggest event in the Arab world right now. There is, as I said, I keep saying it. There is a level of skepticism and cynicism, and unfortunately, it's built upon a certain stereotype or the way people view the Arab world and the way people view our capabilities and abilities. I think this World Cup, hopefully, and our aim is that it does away with that stereotype. It starts breaking down for that stereotype.
And we're going to get into that in just a second. Let me just ask one more news-related question, and then we'll kind of broaden it out a little bit. Not too long ago, we saw the world sporting body, FIFA, UEFA, others, strip Russia for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. A lot of people said that was justified. It is obviously... it raises an interesting question about sports and politics, because we have seen in the context of soccer and some of the human rights issues and causes in this part of the world, Arab players get punished for some of the expression of solidarity with Palestinians or expressing solidarity with Gaza. We've seen FIFA has encouraged players not to do that, in some cases even punished players for taking political stands when it comes to what they perceive to be their human rights causes. What is your reaction to FIFA suspending Russia from the World Cup and participating? And again, I go back to this question, do you think that it is a double standard that Arab countries expressing politics in their sports now may be viewed differently?
Look, I think, you know, for our side, over the last 12 years, we've been very, very committed to the fact that we separate sports from politics. And the main reason is because we've always viewed sports as the platform that we can try to bring people together, bring fans together, bring athletes together, and so on. And that's been the position that we've always taken. It's very, very important to create that platform where we can try to leave aside differences and kind of create bonds that leads to ultimately, let's say, more of a stronger relationship between people, leaving aside, as I said, ideologies, politics, and so on. Now, the actions that were taken by FIFA, again, first and foremost, any act of aggression is condemned, and that's something that, you know, as a state we condemn it, as an individual, you know, definitely anything that affects human life or, you know, the tragedies that we see, creates refugee situations in anywhere, any part of the world, is unacceptable. It's been happening in this part of the world over the last 10 years. It's something that we've unfortunately seen at our doorsteps. And I think what this tournament, what the World Cup, what major sporting events create is an opportunity to try to, as I said, you know, I won't say it's a safe haven, but it's an opportunity really to try to kind of, it's the one spark of unity. It's the one spark of inclusiveness. It's the one spark. The sparks of war are everywhere, and once they're lighted, you can see them spreading throughout the region, throughout the globe. We need to start investing more and more in platforms that bring people together. We need to start investing more and more in opportunities where we can try to resolve conflicts, or at least create the environment to resolve conflicts through dialogue, through engagement, through inclusivity. Now, and that's, it might not have answered your question specifically, but for me it's simple as this. I always believe in the fact that we do need to separate sports from politics.
I was sitting with some Qatari friends yesterday in a majlis, and the word legacy is a word that you use. It's literally in the name of the Supreme Committee, and it is something that they asked. They asked what happens the day after the World Cup to Qatar. What do you want to see happen as the legacy of the World Cup for Qatari citizens who may be worried that right now there are a lot of resources committed to advancing and developing Qatar, and the world's attention is on it, and maybe there are good things being done? The day after the World Cup is over, they want to know what happens to their state.
Well, again, I think it's very important to highlight one thing, because everybody keeps asking what happens after that, as if the reason the state of Qatar exists is for the World Cup. And that's not the case. We are a state, we're a country before the World Cup, we're going to be a country remaining after the World Cup. The investment in education, the investment in the economy, the investment in technology, in renewable energy, in the sporting infrastructure and the sporting industry in itself has started before the World Cup. The World Cup has accelerated a lot of that investment. It's accelerated a lot of these initiatives. It will continue after that, and there are plans that will occur after that, of course. Again, like I said, the investment in terms of the educational infrastructure and the educational institutions, the investment in the medical sector as well. We've got some of the state-of-the-art medical institutions and hospitals as well over here. For example, Sidra Hospital itself is something to be proud of. So, the simple answer is the state will continue after the World Cup. The investments are out there. The industries are being developed and being again committed to in terms of significant amount of investments. What the World Cup did, it accelerated a number of initiatives prior to the tournament. So, for example, if we're looking at transportation infrastructure, today, for anybody that's visited Qatar, for anybody that's, there might still be some construction going on, but there's a significant upgrade in terms of the transportation infrastructure. The metro system in itself, which has a behavioral impact down the road, which is reducing congestion by getting people to use public transportation, less cars on the road, less carbon emissions, but also a healthier lifestyle. That in itself is something that's been invested, not for the World Cup. It was for beyond the World Cup. The World Cup allowed for an acceleration of the project, an acceleration of the initiative, and all these initiatives now will have a life beyond the tournament.
And then beyond the state, in the region, what is the legacy for the region? I know that the role that Qatar is playing in terms of, as we just saw with the Arab Cup, welcoming Arab countries, being a statement, I think, to the Arab world about, to a certain degree, the unity of the sport and how it's grown. But beyond the sport, what is the legacy of the World Cup to the region?
Look, I think, what a lot of people might not know or might not be aware of is when we bid on behalf of the Arab world. When we bid, we said this is an Arab Middle Eastern tournament held in Qatar. That was always it. And, early on during the bidding stage, I remember even meeting ministers of sports, Arab ministers of sports, even though they had nothing to do with, FIFA or the decision-making process, but to gather that momentum, because it is an Arab tournament, first and foremost. For us, from the very beginning, we understood that transformative power. Again, what I said earlier, this is a platform that can do away with stereotypes, can chip away at the negative stereotypes that people have. When you have fans coming in from Wales, from Scotland, from Nigeria, meeting people from Germany, from Ecuador, from Peru, from Argentina, you create these moments of bond, these moments of interaction. And it's these moments that all of a sudden, regardless of whatever was built in your mind previously, the minute you meet somebody else and just interact with them, you all of a sudden turn around and say, that's not such a bad person. And that little spark, you have to kind of invest in it, but that's a very important part. The outside world today looks at the Arab world, looks at us, and unfortunately, going back to the coverage of Russia and Ukraine, and I understand, some of the coverage, unfortunately, in trying to get the European community to sympathize with the refugee situation in Ukraine, drew a certain kind of, parallel or differentiation between our part of the world that, for our side, for something that's been going on for the last 10 years, it did create kind of, that's how the view, it created the question, is that how the world outside views us, views our people? And what we want from this tournament is to be able to do away with that negative outlook that people have from the outside world into us as the Arab world. We're a hospitable nation. We got, great culture. We got great food. You definitely have to diet before you come. It's, there's a lot for us to offer. Having said that as well, what I'm hoping that the World Cup also offers is for us to be able to engage with everybody else from the outside world and change that perception. That idea that, people are coming to colonize us, people are coming to take over us, the conspiracy theory. Because it's rampant, throughout our part of the world as well. So the simple fact is to break down barriers, break down stereotypes, and it's not to push forward ideologies, it's not to push forward principles, it's to build bonds of friendship that last beyond the tournament between the fans, between the people.
You talked about the fans. I'm going to put you on the spot. Which fans are you worried about the most in Qatar? Who do you think is going to be? And don't worry, I know there's some representatives from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs right now.
I'm looking at a lot of friends, raising their hands. So can the camera come towards you so I don't have to say it? No. Look, I think, we're not.
There's definitely one or two countries I know you're worried about them. So.
Well, let me put it this way, right? We're ready to welcome the world. We're ready to welcome everybody. We're engaging with all the fans, and we're, it's going to be a fantastic tournament. And for the simple reasons because it's a compact World Cup, everybody's going to be able to integrate.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to be engaging a lot more in certain parts of the world to, communicate with the fan group a little bit more intently.
Well, let me see if I can ask it a different way, which is, what keeps you up at night as you approach the World Cup? What are you worried the most about?
Ayman, it's become, look, before COVID, I never thought the global pandemic would be it. After COVID, I never thought that, a geopolitical or a war in Europe would. So I don't want to tempt fate.
Do you have that on your bingo card?
No, that's the thing. I don't want to tempt fate.
World War III?
I really don't want to tempt fate by saying this. But other than saying this, look, I think the way I answer it is everything and anything, and at the same time, nothing. Our plans are in place. We're moving ahead. We had the Arab Cup as our test event. There's a lot of things that, we learned from it. There's a lot of things that need to be fixed. There's a lot of things that need to be upgraded. So, of course, we don't have a test event after that. So we want to make sure that everything that we've done during the Arab Cup or lessons learned in the Arab Cup are being implemented. We're talking about transportation. We're talking about, for example, the fan ID, which is now the Hayya card, which was issued, making sure that there's no technical glitches coming out of that, because in the end it's all technology, and it's front-facing technology, so you want to make sure that the system is in place, it doesn't glitch, and so on. And of course, just making sure that the operational plans have been upgraded from the Arab Cup in the lead up to the World Cup.
And do you think that given the time frame, first of all, let me ask you, do you have like a countdown clock on your phone?
Just like that one over there, but much more intimidating.
Do you have an alarm for the first day of the World Cup on your iPhone right now? Do you have like a...
No, I don't. What I'll tell you is this, what I do have, the countdown clock when it was, when it was triple digits in terms of months, everything was fine. When it started going double digits, it started getting scary. And now that it's single digits, I'm trying to find a place to hide.
So you're not going to hide in Qatar. Everybody knows where you are. Let me just tell you, everybody knows who you are. Everybody knows what you're doing at all times.
Well, I'm looking for some friends to hide me when I visit.
Let's talk really quickly about what you learned from the Arab Cup. And I think the big question, on a lot of people's mind is capacity. You're talking about construction. We see it around. Obviously, Qatar has the capacity to do it. The concern is, will there be enough accommodations for the 1 million plus fans that are expected to come to Qatar to attend at least through the first 2 rounds of the World Cup?
Yes, and again, it's always the question that gets asked. So just to clarify to everybody, so what we've done within the Supreme Committee and as a government, we've taken up to about 130,000 rooms, ranging from hotels, apartments, villas, cruise ships, fan villages, and so on. So that all comes to about 130,000 rooms. And the reason we took that on board in terms of our own platform and took over, if you will, that itinerary, is to give priority to ticket holders and to try to make sure that property owners don't jack up the price, because we've seen it in previous tournaments. It's a lesson learned. A lot of people, when they come towards booking the tickets, sometimes come closer to the tournament. What ends up happening is accommodation prices go up the roof. And so what we wanted to do, again, as part of our commitment that this is an accessible, affordable tournament, is offer that level of or that itinerary for the public. So it ranges from from $80. $80 accommodations, and it builds up according, depending on the kind of accommodation that we've got available. There is accommodation as well, of course, available outside in the private sector. That we have no control over the pricing. That is the private sector. They price it as they see fit. But again, the reason right now people might be concerned about the accommodation is because it's just been released into the platform, and the reason it was done is we wanted to do it at the same time as tickets, and we give priority to ticket holders to book first their accommodation. As we start feeding or filling the demand for the ticket holders, then we'll move towards the wider public as well.
And I know this is a question that you have been asked about. It is something that is always on the mind of people here in terms of the progress both the Supreme Committee as well as the state is making on labor rights and those involved in the construction of venues, not just for the World Cup, but generally. I want you to comment on that a little bit, because it always seems to be something that, again, is brought up, some of it rightfully so, perhaps some of it exaggerated, but I want to give you a chance to respond to that.
Well, thank you. Let me say this. You know, when we bid, we knew the spotlight that was going to come. And again, we bid with understanding very well that this is a tournament that, if utilized in the right way, it will accelerate a lot of the initiatives and commitments of the state. The state of Qatar, when it launched its 2030 vision in 2008, under one of its pillars, social development and human development, had worker welfare reforms on its plans. Now, of course, there's a lot of reasons and a lot of issues that happen, you know, in terms of efficiently and effectively implementing the legal system. That was an issue that was undergoing. We knew the World Cup would help catalyze and work as an accelerant for these reforms. Now, since then, you know, we started off in a place that I think nobody can be proud of. You know, there was a lot to be done. I'm very proud to say that today, and this is not me saying it, this is partners that at a point in time stood, you know, across the table from us as adversaries, whether we're talking about the trade unions, International Trade Union Confederation, if we're talking about the Builders and Woodworkers International, or if we're talking about, for example, the UN bodies like the International Labour Organization, that has recognized the significant steps that have been made in Qatar when it comes to labor reforms, the abolition of the kafala system, the implementation of minimum wage, non-discriminatory minimum wage, which is the first of its kind in the region, which means regardless of your nationality, so no longer minimum wage is dictated by bilateral agreements. It is now in the legal system, and it's being reviewed in terms of you know, increasing it in the years to come. Within the Supreme Committee, the initiatives that we've undertaken, I'm very proud to say that even our most ardent of critics, whether we're looking at, for example, NGOs like Amnesty International, has referenced our standards as being the legacy or the standards that should be implemented not only in Qatar but in the region as well, you know, for a long-lasting legacy. So the work that we've been doing within the Supreme Committee itself is being recognized by the most ardent of critics. And I'll say this very plain and simple, you know, just in conclusion. In terms of labor reforms, everybody talks about legacy for tournaments and events after the event. And everybody plans for legacy after the event. We are delivering legacy before the event. And we've delivered legacy, and we've worked very hard towards delivering, you know, legacy, or the legacy of this tournament 12 years into the tournament. 6 months into it, I will say this. I'm very proud of where we're at. The work is not done yet. A lot more needs to be done. And again, I don't think any nation can take the claim that all the work is done. But where we're at today, I have to say I'm very, very proud of the work that we've done.
I know we just have time for one last question. It's been 12 years. What would you advise a country that is thinking about bidding for the World Cup? What would you from what you've learned, would you advise countries that?
I was hoping to gather all this experience and actually open up a consultancy.
Oh yeah.
And get paid for this advice. But you know,
we're going to tell you, you're going to give it free right now.
Well, I'm going to give it free right now, but there's some, you know, I'm going to give you my 99 techniques. I'm going to keep one in the pocket.
World Cup bidding for dummies is the name of the book.
No, I think, look, I think first and foremost, we have to recognize that these tournaments, you know, entering into this, it has to be a bigger play. It can't be just to host a tournament, just for the sake of hosting the tournament. Look, everybody's passionate about the event, but there's got to be a bigger play. There's got to be a bigger objective. And that bigger objective has to be a part of the country's objective. You got to identify early on. I mean, that's what we did. You know, we took the 2030 national vision. We saw the 4 pillars. We worked with the government. The urban development plans that we had, we never imposed the World Cup requirements on it. The metro system was never imposed for the World Cup. It was something that the country was planning to build, and we worked within to make sure that the World Cup requirements complemented and at some time accelerated some of these initiatives, infrastructure-wise or development-wise, and I think that's fundamental. Because, and I'll just this is the one statement, you know, the closing statement that I'll say, you see a lot of major events today, a lot of cities back away from major events, especially if you look at the Olympics. A lot of cities, you know, the people don't want to necessarily host these events if you hold a referendum. And I think one of the reasons is because people don't see necessarily the benefit that comes out of these events. If you're only hosting it purely for an infrastructure project, if you're hosting it only purely for the passion of the event, then I think you're bound to fail. But if you're hosting it with a bigger play, a bigger plan, and a developmental plan, then I think these events really do help.
Are you going to tell us where you're going to go on vacation the day after the World Cup is over?
Absolutely not.
All right.
I'm going to be hiding. Actually, I'm going to be coming to your place. I'm going to come to your farm.
You're more than welcome to. Anyway, ahlan wa sahlan.
Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Hassan Al-Thawadi. Thank you so much, Hassan.
Thank you very much, Hassan Al-Thawadi, for giving us this insight into where the preparations for the World Cup stand, and for giving us as well an insight into diplomacy, the art of diplomacy, and how to dodge all the tough questions. I hope we can stay in touch. I promise I won't ask you who the worst fans are. And thank you, Ayman, for being relentless as always. Thank you all very much indeed for being here with us today as we conclude day one of the 20th edition of the Doha Forum. See you all back here tomorrow for what we hope will be another fascinating day of discussions and dialogue. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. sharp. See you then.